Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this show is Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and it's coming to you from scenic downtown Woodstock, New York, and also from YouTube. And it's been coming to you from scenic downtown Woodstock now for almost 20 years. And there are a lot of shows that are, a lot of segments, a lot of productions that are on YouTube. And they do cover a lot of different subjects. And we're delving, not with regularity, but over time. I am actually talking about the tarot because I'm writing my third book on the tarot. It's called The Spirituality of the Tarot. And it's really a different take because the book has taken on its own personality. It's a very interesting thing. Somebody asked me recently, she said, well, you know, do you think about your readers often? You know, and the answer is no. Once I start writing the book takes on its own personality and it adopts its own things that are important, subjects that need to be covered, explanations that need to be given, and it tells me what I need to do. So it's very, very interesting. I do know, I've never written fiction, but I'm convinced that people who write fiction definitely have breakfast with their book every morning. My books don't necessarily have characters, but what I'm doing, the project, is part of my life. There's no question about it. But the spirituality of the tarot has taken on a lot of questions about the tarot and how it works, and I'm trying to work them through, and it is also covering every card in the Rider-Waite deck, which is 22 of the major arcana cards, and those 22 major arcana cards are the outside influences. They are what comes from afar or comes from our environment to us. And then when you have the other ones, you have the swords and the wands and the cups and the pentacles. Those are the cards that go right to your soul and your heart. And so they are the inner part of you, of a person. When you go to get your cards read, that's where your heart is. And the major arcana is an outside influence. And so today I'm going to read to you from the Emperor. And I really like the Emperor. But I'm also going to talk about several things. I'm going to talk about divination, and I'm going to talk about healing. Because for me, a tarot reader is healing. And that's because and a spread is a healing activity, and a book about the tarot is a healing. It's a healing document, and that's because I'm a healer, and that's what I work with. And healing is the center of the whole process, and the journey that we go through as we try to explore life events, and we like to explore, how are things going to play out. That it goes on. It's complex. Sometimes it takes a while for you to finally realize what's going on. And as you go down your healing path, then you may experience things. You may experience elation. You may experience sadness. You may experience guilt. You may feel stress. I mean, these are all the things that we have as we go down the spirituality of our healing. And tarot works on the soul. It's really interesting to me because tarot is so old. And when we think about the beginning of tarot, we go back to China, we go back to ancient Egypt, we go back to before the written word is what we do. And we go back to the pyramids, and we go back to the ancient temples, because we're trying to get down to the core. And we're trying to get to the foundation. Everybody, and not everybody, some people don't ever think about it. It doesn't occur to them. But I run across people all the time who are trying to get to this foundation. This foundation, they are trying to get to this truth that is going to solve all the problems of the world and is going to tell us why we're here and where we're going. And I don't know anybody that's gotten there yet, but I do know that people are definitely looking. And you don't start with 100 years ago. You go back thousands of years. And it's a difficult path because thousands of years ago, we had scratchings, we had carvings on the inside of caves, we had hieroglyphics, we had things, but we did not have then ways of communicating that we have now. And of course, a lot of those ancient carvings were pictures. And that's what we work with now with the tarot. We work with a picture. We don't necessarily work with, although I have here a lot of words and I work with a lot of words, but we do work with a picture. And this is one of the things that I think really brings a level of truth into the story. Because when somebody comes to my table, or to any tarot reader's table, or to their own table if they have their own deck, and more people have decks than admit, you have a picture. You're looking inside the window of something, and it's up to you to try to figure out what you see in the window. And I do know that in my previous books, in my first two books, when I was looking it through the window, whether it was an Ace of Cups or a Nine of Swords or whatever it was, I had a picture. And of course, the picture was painted by a very famous woman who graduated from Pratt in the early 1900s, Patricia Coleman Smith, and she painted these, and she put a lot of symbolism in them because she herself was a seeker. And so when you look at this card, when you go, first of all, when you go and you sit down at the table of a tarot reader, I think it's important to understand something that we never, ever, ever discuss. And that is that in order for a person, whether that person be a man or a woman, to read cards, you have to go into history. You have to understand where did this deck come from. And so there is this historical element to it. And I know that in Socrates, there's a very famous man by the name of Robert Place. And Robert Place has written books about tarot. He has designed tarot decks, and he reads the tarot. And there are tarot readers all over the place. And we also have another gentleman that was in Woodstock for a long time and may still come back and forth, although I have not met him. And that's David. And David uses the Kabbalah. So he does a version of the tarot. And everybody interprets the tarot in their own way. But the way to begin your interpretation of a tarot card or a tarot deck is, first of all, to go into the history, and second of all, to look at the picture, see what you're seeing, and go for the symbolism. What do these pictures mean? Because that's really where it's at. And in the Emperor, the Emperor represents the stability of a just government. I think that's very, very interesting, the way this was described, of a just government in a society, which means that the Emperor doesn't represent the stability of a third or fourth world country where there are no rules and there are no guidelines. The Emperor represents a peaceful or an organized government. And the Emperor wears a full set of armor under his robes. And it's really interesting because you look at the Emperor and you see that he's got these robes on, and then underneath is this full suit of armor. And this represents the rigid life in a society with a strong government. And I do believe that emperors do have a code of ethics and that they do have guidelines that they live by. And if you look behind the emperor, that there's a thin stream of a river that's flowing, and it represents the lack of life and personal attention available in the emperor's card. And the emperor carries no weapon. He rules through a power of his vision, which I think that is lovely. He has, on his throne, he has 4 rams that are symbols of his life and death power. And the emperor pays attention to boundaries. He knows where the limits are, because he creates the boundaries and he maintains them. And one of the things that he does teach is the meaning and how to see it. In other words, it's how to interact with society's rules, how to follow them, how to get along with them, how to promote them, how to integrate them with other parts of the society. So we're talking about codes of behavior. We're talking about your parents, your family. We're talking about your educational system, your judgments, and your demands. And also, the emperor has a crown, which is a power symbol, because he is a self-directed person and he is also autonomous. And he has a golden sphere in his left hand, which represents the world that he rules over. So, and this is just the bare bones of the symbols. You could spend a lot of time on each tarot card. And as a matter of fact, if you are studying the tarot, if you've got a deck and you're trying to figure out what to do with it, where's the next step to go, I would suggest to you that each day you sit down for a few minutes, you take out a card and you very carefully look at it. And you see what you see. What do you see? What are the colors? What is the scene? How does this fit in for you? And if you do that, you're going to learn a lot. I know that recently I was talking to a woman that was telling me about how she was beginning to read the tarot. And she had a couple of questions. I said, oh, and I know now that it sounded so awful. I said, listen, just take that book and pitch it. And of course, she was horrified. But the truth of the matter is, if you can take each card and if you can interpret it. And if you need a book for that, there are in the Rider-Waite book deck, there are some bound symbol books which will help you see what is in each picture. And I think it's really interesting because when you have a picture, after a while you're going to see things coming back and coming back and coming back. You're going to see, for example, the emperor has red robes. And red is very, very popular in this tarot deck. And it has different reasons for being where. In other words, something that is red has a specific reason for being red. And so these are things that you learn as you just pay attention to what you see on the card. And I know that that there are people who they are reading the deck, and they are reading their own cards, and they're reading for themselves. Reading a tarot cards, reading a spread for yourself and reading a spread for somebody else are two different things. And very recently, a woman has written a book called Tarot for One. And I suggest, now that I just said throw away the book, I suggest that you do get that book. And maybe you can get it at the library and read it, and then you'll have the information. And I think it's important. Now, this may not be true for everyone that reads tarot, but I think it pretty much is, even if it's not some of your front burner rules or guidelines, but I definitely think it's true. And that is that tarot heals. When people, there's one thing to just be, and I see this every week at the flea market. People will say, "Oh, look, it's a tarot reader," and a woman, it's usually a woman, although it can definitely be a man, will sit down at the table, and you realize they really don't have a problem. They really are not upset over something. They have not lost something. They are not, they're just trying to see, well, what does the tarot reader do? That is one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is somebody who is really has such problems that it's like they're taking over the person's life, and they just, it's a serious situation. So whether you're here or here, you're going to heal. You're going to go through a healing process. And whether you sit down at the spread, and as soon as somebody says something, immediately in your mind and maybe to the reader, you say, "I don't believe that. I don't believe a word that you're saying." That's okay. That's okay. You don't have to. The tarot does not have to, it does not have to be believed at the moment. That's why when I give my booklet that I have marked up for each person, for each reading, it doesn't matter to me whether they believe what I said or what I saw or not. Because sometimes people are going to just go into denial or refusal or whatever. They're just going to say no, no, no matter what. And it may take several days for them to say, "Oh, well, maybe that really is true. Maybe so." So there is that little healing path that everyone does experience. And so while you're at the table with the tarot reader at that moment not only is reading the cards, but is helping to heal you. And then through the cards, the reader reads whatever they read, And then at the end, and while this happens, you're in a kind of a little bubble. You're in the bubble of the spread. And then when it's all over, then you just say thank you and you get up and walk away. Whether or not you were happy has nothing to do with it. But a lot of people who are in the midst of saying, oh, this is just bunk, it's really interesting. They come back. It's really interesting. And it doesn't bother me at all. And I think it's very interesting that we have, through the history of the tarot, we have a Chinese path, we have the Egyptian path, and then of course we have the modern path, which is your 1500s through Italy, which is very Catholic. And it has taken me 40 years to really see the religion and that kind of religious spirituality in the cards. And I've recently added a couple of chapters about the archangels, because we have 3 archangels in the tarot. We have Archangel Gabriel, Archangel Raphael, and we have Archangel Michael. And then there are just angels in the tarot that don't necessarily have spreads. And it's really interesting. There are some people who have written about the tarot, and they have written books about tarot that include cards that have, for example, Archangel Gabriel and Archangel Raphael and Archangel Michael, and they don't name them, which is really interesting. And Rachel Pollack talks about the 4th archangel, which is Archangel Uriel. So I'm going to be writing a chapter about angels in the tarot. But to get back to the basic story before I got sidelined, we have all these different lineages that kind of come together in 2025. And there is one lineage which is really interesting because it's kind of spoken about, but it doesn't get as much coverage as, say, the ancient Egyptians or the Italian or whatever. And that is the Romany. And the Romany path of the tarot is the gypsies. And not everybody who does tarot talks about healing. This is me talking about healing. But they definitely are, because they're still out there. These Romany tarot readers are still out there and have been for several hundred years. They came through very early. They came before the tarot hit Italy. And they've been reading cards, and they have been divining the future, they have been healing people, they have been doing all kinds of wonderful things, and they have their own paths. And I have only found in all of the books that I have purchased and read about the tarot, I have only found 2 that have been authored by Romany readers. So that would be something I may talk about later on, some other time. But one of the things that I am going to talk about is why people come to your table, before we start talking about the emperor. People sometimes they come to the tarot because they have a situation, they have a problem, they have something's happening in their lives, and they want to discuss it. They're not any, I don't know, anything, they're not overcome or whatever, but they do want to discuss their problem. And so they sit down and they talk to you about it. And I am more than happy to sit and talk to them about it. I mean, we go way beyond the card. We go to a discussion of their problem. And I call it reflection. They just want to talk about their problem. Hey, I can't think of a better place to go than a tarot. I always do a spread. We always start it with a spread. I'm not sure, I don't know how other tarot readers do, but it does end up being a conversation. And the other reason is I call seeking peace. A person is stressed over a situation, and they are just up to here. They are stressed. There are a lot of tarot readers in today's market that are talking about civic situations, government situations, work situations, because now there's so much politics involved in people's workplace. So there's all of this, and when you're trying to make sense of what's happening, a tarot table can be a really good place to go. And then, of course, the healing, because tarot is healing. No matter what you call it, it's healing. And then you have somebody who's trying to make a decision. They are at the fork in the road, and who is the famous person that said, when you come to the fork in the road, you take it? Well, that's where they're at. And it's really interesting, and I am always happy to discuss that decision with anybody that wants to. And that decision can be one of the most difficult decisions of your life. I know that sometimes, this has happened more than once. A person will come to me and will say, look, I'm here, I can do this or this, but this is what I want to accomplish. If I go here, am I going to, what am I going to accomplish? And if I go here, what am I going to? I love it when I can look at them and say, look, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do, whichever direction you take, you are going to do that thing that you are trying to do. To me, that's just the most delightful thing, how a person gets themselves in a situation where they're going to go down that path that they want to go down. Either way. And another reason that a person comes to me is if they're trying to find themselves. I definitely see these people during the summer. They are trying to find themselves. They're trying to find their path in life. Sometimes, the next section is love and romance, but sometimes they come because they're trying to save a marriage. They're trying to create the family. They had some kind of an idea when they reached into adulthood or early adulthood. They had a vision of what that was going to be. And now, here they are, 5, 10, 15 years later, and that vision has long since disappeared. And so they are trying to discover what happened and can they reclaim it, and so that's a really important thing. And of course, then love and romance. Romance and love is always fun. And romance and love, listen, everybody thinks that in order to have romance and love, that you've got to meet that important other person. I am here to tell you that it is often not another person. It is often a career path. It is often a direction. it is often a lot besides a person. And we see people all the time who are in love with and are romancing their careers, their hobbies, their what all. So that's when you think about the significant other can often be not a human. And then we come along with divination. And that's what everybody thinks that tarot is about. And it is quite often there. People are coming because they're trying to figure out what's going on. And tarot is perfect for that, because with the tarot, you bring out the spread and you have these cards and you have all of these pictures, and you can come to understand these pictures. You can take your book home with the different cards highlighted in the booklet. You can take a snapshot of your spread. So there is a lot there. And divination is, divination takes on interesting things. I tell a story, and I write about it in my book, about how when I was a young woman in Mexico and in Venezuela, and I would, be in a gathering where there were a lot of other young women, and we were all, wearing beautiful clothes and whatever, I don't know. Well, anyway, so I would end up by using a needle and thread, and I would tell them all how many times they were going to have children, how many times they would get pregnant. And that would always happen when I got bored. When I got bored, I would whip it out and I would start telling people that. And I did that for, 20 years. I had a relative, Aunt Jackie. Aunt Jackie doused for water. And she was good at it. And in Texas, that was no small feat, because Texas doesn't always have as much water as it should have. So there was that but she never taught me how. She never mentioned it to me. I saw her do it a few times, and I saw what happened when she said, okay, go here. And they dug down after several hundred feet or whatever and found some water. So I saw that, but I didn't see the pendulum. And I have had one or two pendulums in my life, but I don't really use a pendulum. If I'm gonna do something, I guess I'll do this if I can find it. Okay, here. I will take a necklace. See, it's already working. It's already working. And I don't show any favorites. Whatever I've got on, that's whatever necklace or whatever bracelet I've got on, that's what's my pendulum. But you can buy them. I was at a holiday bazaar flea market last Saturday, and I was sharing a booth with a woman who was selling pendulums. And the first time I ever saw a pendulum used, I was in Vienna, Virginia, at a place called Terra Christa. And I was Terra Christa was a shop, and I was in the room where they had books and some rocks. And this woman came in and she had this pendulum, and she was going to town with this pendulum. She was looking for a specific kind of rock and didn't know what it was. So she had this pendulum and she used it. So I bought a pendulum that afternoon, and I came home and I used it But truthfully, I mean, this is, if you've got a necklace, you know, with something on it, or a bracelet with something on it, that's all you need, really. And what you do is, well, let me get this again, because I forgot to tell you. I always tell people how to do it. You have a necklace or a bracelet or something, and what you do is you kind of clean it off like that. Kind of clean it off, and then you say, now, I need a yes. Okay, did you see what happened? Back and forth for this pendulum and this question is yes. And now I need a no. And there we go, into a circle. And so that's good for one question. You can't get a yes and no for the rest of your life. With each time you're going to ask a question, you have to ask the pendulum, give me a yes and give me a no. And that's your accuracy. So anyway, so I have used it, and I have used it on the Reiki table, although you know it is what it is, because that is. You can use a dowsing rod. You can do all kinds of things with it. But you just go with whatever is happening. You know within you the answer. So that's what you've got. Now, that's divination. That's definitely divination. When you go see Susan Saxman, Fiona Saxman, people travel for miles and miles and miles around. They wait for months for an appointment, and they come over here and see her, and they get an appointment, and they are extremely happy. That is divination. She doesn't need anything else. I would say 30 years ago, 35 years ago, my husband and I took a vacation to Mystic, Connecticut. And I was practicing Reiki at the time, and we went to a place in Mystic for a Reiki session, which was a very interesting thing. And I had a lovely Reiki session, and then we were walking along, in this little strip center, and I saw a sign that said tarot. So immediately I said, hey, I got to go get a tarot reading. So I did, and it was a classic tarot reading. I went in, I walked up a flight of stairs, because we were right on the boardwalk of Mystic. And I went upstairs, and there was an apartment up there, and it was an older woman, and she had, her children and grandchildren were there, and we sat down at the dining room table, and she read my cards, except she didn't read my cards. That woman, she did not read my cards, but that woman told me so much. She told me the life path of my 4 grandchildren. She told me all kinds of things. And I'm going, my jaw dropped, man, I loved it. That was what she did. And she was using the tarot cards as a cover. So people could say, well, I went to see this tarot reader, and that's great. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And when the Socrates Animal Shelter has their psychic day, they have some tarot readers, and they have also some psychic people. So you can go there as well, and the response at the Socrates Animal Shelter will be, it will be sincere. The people who work there, they donate their time, They're going to be sincere, they're going to be well trained, they're going to be all kinds of things. So divination is there. And in this path of divination, tarot is a very, very comfortable component. And I guess the basic, what I'm saying here is that it's different for everything. Whether you read the cards, whether you talk to a psychic, whether you whatever you do, it's the response is sincere, and that's the way it is supposed to be. But each modality works in a different way. So now we're going to come to the card of the day, which is the Emperor. And I have talked about the symbolism of the Emperor. And each card in the book that I'm reading, that I'm reading from, and the book that I am writing on, will have symbolism. The symbolism is very important. And then it's going to have each chapter, and then it's going to, the theme of the Emperor is taking responsibility. And then there's a section called Getting to Know the Emperor. Ladies, pay attention, because this is important. The Emperor doesn't quibble around with what is right and what is wrong. An authority figure, he knows what is worth having and what is worth fighting for. He is his own person. He is also an important father figure. And finally, the Emperor may be a person of authority, such as a boss. The Emperor is balanced, he brings security, and he brings conventional values. Boundaries, both creating and maintaining them, have meaning for the Emperor. He sees and understands their meanings. The Emperor understands and he respects society's rules, and this includes codes of behavior. The Emperor has authority and power, and he likes to control it all. He is a moral figure who conducts himself accordingly. He sets boundaries and works within them, and he works with structure, rules, logic, and reason. Followers of the tarot refer to the Emperor as a man, but if you've been listening to the last few paragraphs, the Emperor can be a woman. It depends upon your job description. Women are the Emperor when they structure themselves in accordance with those rules. This can be an uplifting and powerful experience for a female needing the Emperor's skills. The Emperor has a reputation as a warrior, but really he's a ruler. His moral code requires that he fight for what is right and for what he protects. His job description requires that he lay down ideals, morals, ethics, and outcomes for those around him. The authority of the Emperor requires him to defend them, and he teaches those around him that if something is worth having, it is worth fighting for. Emperors become skilled business people, governmental figures, benevolent partners, fathers, and mothers. An emperor is strong and steady and can take charge and is adaptable in many situations. Sometimes a man comes into emperorhood when his father dies and when father issues need to be worked out. The emperor honors and respects tradition. And then the second part of this chapter is a story, and I have a story illustrating every card. My father was the emperor in my life. Although he was depicted as a warrior, he was a ruler. In the Rider-Waite deck, the emperor wore robes over a full set of armor. My father wore armor daily. His armor was a bulletproof vest and a sidearm which he hid under his arm in a leather holster. When he was in public, I never once saw my father without a suit coat over his armor, and he even wore his armor at the breakfast table. My father, a small-town Texas attorney, was good enough at what he did to plead a case in the Supreme Court of the United States of America in Washington, D.C. I never knew the particulars or even the names of the plaintiffs of the defendants. What I knew was that my mother took him clothes shopping in Austin and bought a special blue serge suit and a white shirt with just the right collar and even more special somber tie just for the occasion. And on or about May 15th, 1954, he packed himself, my mother, and myself into his late model dark green Oldsmobile 88 and drove to Washington, D.C. to plead the case. While we were there, he drove us around Washington, D.C. so I could see the Capitol, the White House, the Washington Monument, and the George Washington University campus. We didn't get out of the car to walk around the city or even stay the night in Washington, D.C. My father, who always carried a concealed weapon, knew the martial arts of the day, served in the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, and was in the OSS during World War II, did not call attention to himself. He didn't want to be noticed by anyone because he was constantly on the lookout for trouble. And for him, crowds meant trouble. He saw things and people and could pick a person out of a crowd and recognize him or her as trouble. And this was an attitude that I grew up with. After riding around Washington, D.C. all day, we ate dinner at a fish restaurant, O'Donnell's. Fish was not readily available in my hometown, so my father loved the meal. I don't remember what fish dish he ordered, but I do remember that when he ordered for us, he asked the waitress, "Do you have jalapenos?" They were served at every meal in our home. Mother drove across the bridge into Villa Cuna and bought large number 10 cans of them in a bodega there. After dinner, he drove us to Salisbury, Maryland, and we stayed in the Wicomico Hotel. The next morning, he put on his fancy new suit, shirt, ties, shoes, and drove back to Washington, D.C. to plead his case before Justice Robert Jackson, Harold Burton, Fred M. Vinson, Hugo Black, Thomas C. Clark, Sherman Minton, Stanley Forman Reed, Felix Frankfurter, and William O. Douglas, the Supreme Court justices of the day. And then he returned to the hotel in Salisbury, paid the bill, picked us up, and drove home to Texas. He drove nonstop, taking the short route through Arkansas. He returned home to his practice, which was primarily civil, but included criminal cases because he provided whatever services his small-town clients needed. At a time when women had few rights in Texas, my father was known area-wide for doing much for his clients. In divorce cases, he had a reputation for taking everything for his female clients, especially if there were children involved. The first thing he did was clean out the checking account, leaving 15 cents for the divorcing husband, and the washing machine went where the children went. I recall every day that he used the word ethical somehow. Focus in is another section that the chapters have, and this focus in asks, what is your relationship to responsibility? And can you journal about this masculine energy? And there is a meditation. This meditation is most active when practiced in the morning. The goal is a meditation that is tranquil and quiet. Find a quiet and safe place which will be distraction-free. The goal here is to find a supportive and stable place where you can sit on the floor or recline in a cushioned chair. You want to be both relaxed and alert so you can go about your activities with a positive, focused attitude. Once you are seated, Encourage your body to feel at ease while remaining aware. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Hold this breath for a moment, and now exhale this air. Now continue breathing naturally. As you breathe in and breathe out, feel the support and the comfort of where you are resting. And connect to this place. Allow each breath you observe continue to connect you to this place and this day. These in-breaths and out-breaths clear away mental stress and clutter, and they steady you for the coming events, both scheduled and unscheduled. Take a moment to settle your intention for the day. Prepare yourself to continue through your coming schedule with clarity and positive intent. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. And center yourself now and continue with your attitude of calm and positivity. And take another deep in-breath now and appreciate your readiness for the coming day. Bring to mind a powerful attitude reflecting how you will move through the coming hours. Let this attitude resonate with your inner self. Release the negativity, take a deep breath, and wiggle your fingers and toes. Open your eyes and go about your day. And with that, I come to the end of this class, and I thank you very much for your patience, for being with us this evening, and for tolerating a Reiki class. We are offering these classes on an intermittent basis, and I look forward to seeing you at my Reiki table, at my tarot table in the summer. And thank you very, very much, Ellen. This was very nice. Thank you.